Hey everyone! In this video, we're walking through every question in Module 1 of Practice Test number 9. That's 25 questions. For each one, I'll read the passage, show the question, pause so you can think, then walk through every wrong answer, and finish with the correct one. Question 1 of 25. We're opening on a hard one. Stay focused. This passage is titled, "The Heart of Exploration." The passage describes exploration as a struggle against two kinds of adversaries: the external environment and internal doubt. Using Lewis and Clark as the central example, it weaves together treacherous rivers and fierce wildlife with fears of failure and uncertainty. The question asks how the author conveys these dual challenges faced by explorers. The choices offer 4 different rhetorical approaches: a blend of physical and psychological description, statistical evidence about failure rates, a contrast with contemporaries, or anecdotes centered solely on dangerous wildlife. We need the option that matches the actual texture of the writing. Choice B fails because the passage offers no numbers or statistics about how often explorers failed. The approach is descriptive and narrative. Choice C is wrong because the author never compares Lewis and Clark to contemporaries, focusing instead on the explorer's own internal and external battles. Choice D misreads the scope. Wildlife is mentioned only briefly alongside rivers and vastness, and the passage is not built on isolated anecdotes about animal encounters. Choice A fits precisely. The author pairs vivid external imagery, like treacherous rivers and the unrelenting vastness of the West, with internal observations about wavering determination and inner fortitude. That blend of natural obstacles and psychological struggle is exactly the dual challenge the passage builds toward. Question 2 of 25. Another tough one. This passage is titled "The Social Dimensions of Innovation." The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by inventions like the steam engine, but by social networks among inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. The question asks how the author supports the claim that these relationships played a crucial role. We need to identify the rhetorical strategy the author uses. The choices offer 4 possibilities: an explicit comparison, an emphasis on informal exchanges, a focus on urban settings, or a framing of social dynamics as underappreciated. Choice B is wrong because informal exchanges are mentioned only as one example alongside formal partnerships, not used as the main support. Choice C fails because urban industrial cities are noted briefly as a setting, but the author does not build the argument around geography. Choice D misreads the tone. The passage observes that social dynamics are less visible, but it does not frame them as underappreciated, only as equally important. Choice A is correct because the passage directly weighs social relationships against technological innovations, stating that inventions alone did not create the revolution, and concluding that the social dimension was equally crucial to the transformation. That side-by-side weighting is the central support strategy. Question 3 of 25. Staying in hard territory. This passage is titled "Transformations in Industrial Society." The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution's progress depended not just on machines, but on collaboration and shared ingenuity among inventors. The question asks how the author uses language to emphasize the significance of these manufacturing transformations. We need to identify a specific rhetorical or stylistic technique the author actually employs in the passage. The choices offer 4 possibilities: metaphor, statistics, direct comparison, and listed examples. Our task is to match one to what the text genuinely does. Choice B fails because the passage cites no statistical data and never mentions patent filings. Choice C is wrong because, although both technological and social factors appear, the author does not stage a direct, point-by-point comparison between them. Choice D misses the mark because no specific cooperative partnerships are listed. The passage speaks only of a general collaborative spirit. Choice A is correct because the author leans on metaphorical language, calling networks of trust and intellectual exchange the hidden machinery of the era's progress. By framing human collaboration in mechanical terms, the author elevates intangible cooperation to the same significance as gears and pistons. Question 4 of 25. Another hard one. This passage is titled Analyzing the Role of Solar Reflective Paint in Urban Cooling. The passage describes how solar reflective paint is being studied as a tool to reduce urban heat island effects, with early data showing rooftop coatings can lower surrounding air temperatures by up to 2 degrees Celsius. The question asks which finding would most directly support the researchers' claim about the paint's effectiveness in cooling cities. We need a choice that ties reflective paint usage specifically to lower temperatures, since that is the heart of the researchers' hypothesis. Options touching on durability, glare, or air quality may sound related, but they sidestep the core claim about cooling. Choice B addresses durability over 5 years, which speaks to long-term effectiveness, but says nothing about whether the paint actually cools cities. Choice C describes glare, which the passage lists as a potential side effect rather than evidence of temperature reduction. Choice D points to lower air pollution, an unrelated environmental benefit that does not confirm the paint's cooling role. Choice A is correct because it offers a direct comparison. Cities that widely use reflective paint report consistently cooler nights than cities that do not. That observation aligns precisely with the hypothesis that reflective coatings lower temperatures, giving the researchers' claim concrete supporting evidence. Question 5 of 25, a medium after that. This passage is titled Marie Curie's Discovery and Nobel Prize. The passage profiles Marie Curie, noting how late 19th century discoveries like X-rays inspired her, how she isolated polonium and radium, how she defied gender biases, and how she became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, later earning a second. The question asks, which choice best describes the primary purpose of the passage? We need the option that captures the overall point, not a single supporting detail. Choices A and D zoom in on radioactivity itself, choice C zooms in on gender bias, and choice B frames the passage around Curie's contributions to science and society. Choice A is wrong because radioactivity is mentioned only as the area Curie advanced. The passage never explains its physical properties. Choice C is wrong because gender bias appears in just one clause about her Nobel distinction and is not the main focus. Choice D is wrong because medicine is referenced only in the closing line about future advancements, not discussed as an application. Choice B is correct because every sentence centers on Curie, her inspiration, her meticulous experiments, the elements she isolated, her 2 Nobel Prizes, and her influence on later science and medicine. That sweep of personal achievement plus broader impact matches a purpose of highlighting her contributions to scientific advancement and society. Question 6 of 25. Now it gets harder. This passage is titled The Social Mechanisms of the Industrial Revolution. The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by inventions like the steam engine, but by social networks among inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers who shared and improved patents. The question asks how the author conveys the impact of community collaboration on the era's technological advancements. We need an answer that captures the author's actual rhetorical move, pairing the obvious, visible technologies with the hidden social fabric that made them possible. The right choice should reflect that contrast between what we see and what we don't. Choice A fails because the passage never names specific inventions that resulted from collaboration. It only references the steam engine and power loom in general terms. Choice C is wrong because the author does not contrast lone inventors with collective efforts. Instead, the focus is on how social ties surrounded all innovation. Choice D misses because no statistics or numerical data on patents are offered, only a qualitative description of how patents were exchanged. Choice B fits precisely. The author names the visible outcomes, smoking chimneys, the steam engine, the power loom, and then sets them against the less visible underlying mechanism, the network of shared patents and informal exchanges. By highlighting this interplay between surface results and deeper social machinery, the author conveys how collaboration powered the technological change. Question 7 of 25. Staying in hard territory. This passage is titled An Essay on the Social Foundations of the Industrial Revolution. The question asks how the author emphasizes the significance of the social relationships that shaped the Industrial Revolution. The passage opens by acknowledging familiar inventions like the steam engine and power loom, then pivots to argue that the real driver of change was the network connecting inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. We need to identify the rhetorical move the author leans on most heavily. The options point to direct evidence, a metaphor, descriptive detail about cities, or a contrast between technology and collaboration. Choice A is wrong because shared patents are mentioned only briefly as illustration, not as the central rhetorical strategy. Choice B is wrong because the smoking chimney comparison is a small flourish, not the primary technique driving the argument. Choice C is wrong because the author never describes the growth of British cities in detail. The cities are just the setting where the social exchanges occurred. Choice D is correct because the passage is built on a clear contrast. Traditional histories highlight machines, but the author insists the social network was the true engine of change. By setting technological innovation against human collaboration, the author elevates the importance of those relationships. Question 8 of 25, a medium after that. This passage is titled Alan Turing and the Birth of Modern Computing. The question asks which choice best states the main purpose of a text about Alan Turing, tracing his 1936 paper, The Turing Machine Concept, his Enigma code-breaking work, and his post-war contributions to electronic computers and artificial intelligence. Each choice frames the purpose differently. Option A narrows the focus to artificial intelligence, B emphasizes mathematics and the war, C points to Turing's broad influence on modern computing, and D zeroes in on how the Turing machine works. Choice A is too narrow because artificial intelligence is mentioned only briefly as one of several contributions. Choice B treats his mathematics and wartime efforts as the end point, but the passage frames these as pieces of a larger story about computing. Choice D fails because the text names the Turing machine and its purpose without describing its inner workings in any detail. Choice C captures the unifying thread of the passage. Every example given, from the theoretical Turing machine to the Enigma work to his post-war machines and AI exploration, is offered as evidence of how Turing's ideas shaped modern computing. The closing line explicitly credits him with shaping the field of computer science, confirming this is the central purpose. Question 9 of 25. Staying at medium. This passage is titled Harnessing the Tides, the Promise of Tidal Energy. The passage discusses tidal energy as a renewable resource, describing how underwater turbines capture the motion of tidal currents, and noting both the predictability of tides and the obstacles that come with this technology. The question asks which choice best states the main purpose of the text. Because this is a main purpose question, the right answer must capture the full scope of the passage, not a side detail or an idea the text never actually develops. We need a choice that reflects both the explanation of how tidal energy works and the discussion of its drawbacks. Choice A is wrong because the passage never mentions historical use of tidal energy by any culture. Choice C is wrong because although predictability is noted, the text does not focus on environmental benefits over other sources and even points to ecological harm. Choice D is wrong because the passage never advocates for increased research funding. It simply describes recent developments in turbine design. Choice B is correct because the passage explains the mechanism of harvesting tidal energy through underwater turbines spun by currents, then explicitly raises challenges like high installation costs and ecological impacts. That balance of mechanism and challenge matches B precisely. Question 10 of 25. Now, it gets harder. This passage is titled The Social Dynamics of the Industrial Revolution. The question asks how the author conveys the complexity of social innovation during the Industrial Revolution. The passage argues that while inventions like the steam engine get the spotlight, the real driver was a network of relationships between inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. We need a choice that captures the author's main rhetorical move, setting up a contrast between what's obvious and what's hidden but equally important. The right answer should reflect how the passage juxtaposes machinery, with the social fabric behind it. Choice A is too narrow. Partnerships are mentioned, but the author's strategy is the broader visible versus invisible comparison, not just describing collaborations. Choice C fails because the passage never details any specific patents. It only says patents were shared and modified in general terms. Choice D misreads the structure. There's no chronological sequencing of events, only an interplay between social and technological factors presented thematically. Choice B nails this. The passage explicitly contrasts smoking factory chimneys, the visible technological advances, with the less visible social dimension of shared patents and informal exchanges, calling both equally crucial. That comparison is the very structure the author uses to convey complexity. Question 11 of 25. A medium after that. This passage is titled The Pioneering Work of Rachel Carson. The passage traces how Rachel Carson's 1962 book Silent Spring exposed the dangers of pesticides like DDT and helped launch the modern environmental movement. The question asks which choice best describes the primary purpose of the passage. Because this is a primary purpose question, we need the option that captures the passage as a whole, not just a single detail mentioned along the way. The choices range from narrow specifics, such as the EPA or DDT, to broader framings about Carson's influence and historical attitudes toward pesticides. Choice A is too narrow since the EPA's creation appears only as one example of the impact Carson's work produced. Choice C misreads the emphasis because while DDT's harms are noted, the passage profiles Carson's broader contribution rather than mounting an argument against agricultural DDT. Choice D inflates a brief framing detail. The mid-century view of nature is mentioned only to set up Carson's intervention, not as the passage's main subject. Choice B is correct because the passage centers on Carson herself, her credentials, her research, and the ripple effects of her book on public opinion, policy, and the environmental movement. Highlighting her contribution to raising environmental awareness accurately captures that overall focus. Question 12 of 25. Now it gets harder. This passage is titled The Social Engine of Innovation. The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by inventions like the steam engine, but by the social networks connecting inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. The question asks how the author uses Britain's industrial cities as evidence for that claim about collaboration. We have four interpretations of the city's role: as hubs of collaborative creativity, as a venue for counting patents, as a contrast with rural areas, or as proof that specific technologies were insufficient on their own. Choice B misreads the patent reference. The author treats patents as vehicles for collaboration, not as a numerical measure of innovation. Choice C invents a city versus rural contrast that the passage never draws. Choice D shifts the emphasis to the inadequacy of the steam engine and power loom, but the cities are introduced to illustrate the positive force of social networks, not to dwell on what those machines lacked. Choice A fits precisely. The passage describes Britain's growing industrial cities as places where patents were shared, modified, and improved through formal partnerships and informal exchanges. That depiction casts the cities as hubs of collaborative creativity, where social ties amplified the impact of individual inventions. Question 13 of 25. Still hard. This passage is titled The Social Engine of the Industrial Revolution. The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was not driven by inventions alone, but by the web of social relationships among inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. The question asks how the author supports the claim that social dynamics fueled this manufacturing transformation. We need the choice that matches the author's actual method of support, pointing to collaboration and exchange rather than statistics, productivity contrasts, or solo achievement. Choice A misreads the passage, which highlights collaboration rather than independent contributions from individuals working alone. Choice C is unsupported because the author never compares the productivity of solo inventors to that of teams. Choice D fails because the passage offers no data, statistics, or correlation figures linking industrial growth to patent sharing, only qualitative description. Choice B is correct because the author explicitly cites partnerships in the practice of patents being shared, modified, and improved through both formal partnerships and informal exchanges in Britain's industrial cities. These examples of collaborative knowledge sharing directly back the claim that social dynamics powered the transformation. Question 14 of 25. Another tough one. This passage is titled On the Habitability of Exoplanets. The passage argues that habitability depends not just on temperature and water, but on a planet's dynamism. The question asks how the author uses anecdotal evidence, specifically Dr. Strauss's story about a distant planet with volcanoes, tectonic shifts, and fluctuating magnetic fields to strengthen this overall argument. Each option offers a different rhetorical purpose for the anecdote, adding scientific credibility through data, illustrating the role of geological activity, contrasting with a lifeless planet, or pointing out gaps in understanding. We need the option that matches how the author actually deploys the story. Choice A misses the mark because the anecdote does not present specific scientific data. It illustrates a concept rather than citing measurements. Choice C fails because the passage never contrasts the planet's features with those of a lifeless world. No such comparison appears. Choice D is wrong because the author is not highlighting gaps in understanding. The anecdote affirms, rather than questions, the link between geological activity and life potential. Choice B is correct. The author uses Dr. Strauss's account as a vivid example showing how geological activity, volcanoes, tectonic shifts, magnetic fields, can foster life by cycling nutrients and maintaining climatic stability. The anecdote concretely illustrates the broader claim that habitability requires energy and renewal, not just a Goldilocks temperature. Question 15 of 25. Staying in hard territory. This passage is titled, The Role of Social Collaboration in the Industrial Revolution. The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution was driven not just by inventions like the steam engine and power loom, but by a network of social relationships among inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. The question asks how the author emphasizes the role of social collaboration in advancing technological progress. We need to identify the rhetorical strategy the author uses. The choices offer 4 possibilities: directly challenging technology's role, citing statistics, drawing a contrast between visible tech and invisible social practices, or ranking informal over formal exchanges. Choice A overstates the author's stance. The passage qualifies, rather than directly challenges, the adequacy of technological innovation, stressing collaboration as a complement. Choice B fails because no statistics or numerical evidence appear. The discussion of shared patents is purely qualitative. Choice D misreads the text, which mentions both formal partnerships and informal exchanges without ranking one above the other. Choice C captures the author's actual move. The passage sets tangible images like smoking factory chimneys and famous machines against the less visible but equally crucial network of shared patents and informal exchanges. This explicit contrast between what is seen and what is unseen is precisely how social collaboration is elevated. Question 16 of 25. Another hard one. This passage is titled The Unseen Force of Innovation. The question asks how the author conveys the importance of social relationships in driving innovation during the Industrial Revolution. We need to identify the rhetorical strategy at work, not just the topic itself. The choices offer 4 possible techniques: a contrast between technology and collaboration, a focus on specific inventions, a statistical breakdown of patents, or an outright dismissal of technology. We should look for the move the passage actually performs. Choice B is wrong because, although the steam engine and power loom are named, the author uses them as a foil rather than highlighting their importance. Choice C is wrong because no statistics appear. Patent sharing is described only in general terms. Choice D is wrong because the author calls the social dimension equally crucial, not more important, and never dismisses technological inventions. Choice A is correct because the passage opens by acknowledging traditional emphasis on inventions like the steam engine and power loom, then pivots to argue that the real engine of change was the network of social relationships among inventors, entrepreneurs, and workers. That juxtaposition between visible technical advances and less visible interpersonal collaboration is exactly the contrast described in A. Question 17 of 25. Still hard. This passage is titled The Underpinnings of Industrial Progress. The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution's breakthroughs depended on interconnected networks of inventors who shared and built on each other's work. The question asks how the author highlights the significance of collaboration during this period of technological advancement. We need to identify the rhetorical strategy the author actually uses, not just a theme that sounds related to the Industrial Revolution. The right answer must match concrete moves in the text, references to patent records and to James Watt being aided by partners. Choice A misreads the passage, which downplays solitary genius and stresses that inventors were influenced by earlier ideas, so individual ingenuity is not the focus. Choice C is unsupported because the author never questions whether inventions of the era were technically viable. Choice D overstates the structure. While collaboration is praised, the author does not set up an explicit contrast comparing isolated inventions against collaborative networks to weigh their relative impact. Choice B fits because the author points to specific examples of collaboration, most notably James Watt's refinements of the steam engine, which were facilitated by earlier designs and by partners helping with financing and strategy. These concrete instances are exactly how the author illustrates collaboration's importance. Question 18 of 25. Another tough one. This passage is titled The Role of Social Networks in the Industrial Revolution. The passage argues that the Industrial Revolution is commonly credited to inventions like the steam engine and spinning jenny, but a hidden web of social interaction in places like coffee houses actually drove the breakthroughs. We are asked how the author's juxtaposition of these two descriptions underscores the importance of social relationships. The choices offer 4 different rhetorical moves, contrasting unseen networks with tangible inventions, focusing only on informal urban exchanges, downplaying technology, or citing statistics. We need the option that captures the actual contrast the passage builds. Choice B is wrong because the passage never restricts itself to informal city exchanges. It broadly credits collaborative networks. Choice C misreads the tone, since the author calls the inventions groundbreaking and revolutionary rather than minimizing them. Choice D fails because no statistics appear in the passage. The support is purely descriptive analysis of how ideas circulated. Choice A is correct because the passage explicitly sets the visible, tangible inventions against the less visible but equally crucial human networks. By describing the machines and then revealing the communal conversations beneath them, the author elevates social relationships to the same level of importance as the physical technologies. Question 19 of 25. Staying in hard territory. This passage is titled The Impact of City Planning on Public Safety. The question asks how the author constructs the argument that civic infrastructure shapes urban safety. We need to identify the rhetorical strategy used across the passage, not just a single detail it mentions. The choices describe 4 different argumentative moves, contrasting old and new explanations, presenting detailed statistics, critiquing enforcement strategies, or stressing individual responsibility. We can test each against what the passage actually does, paying attention to its opening framing and the kinds of evidence it offers. B is wrong because the passage references data only in general terms. It never supplies a detailed statistical breakdown across neighborhoods. C misreads the focus. The author does not critique flaws in enforcement-based strategies, but simply offers civic infrastructure as a more powerful systemic factor. D contradicts the passage, which centers systemic planning-level factors and community accountability rather than individual responsibility as the lever for reducing crime. Choice A fits best. The opening sentence sets up traditional attributions, police force size and economic affluence, and then pivots with, but recent findings point to a subtler systemic determinant, civic infrastructure. That pivot establishes a contrast between conventional explanations and emerging evidence, and the rest of the passage develops the new explanation with examples about pedestrian zones, public transit, and shared spaces. Question 20 of 25. Another hard one. This passage is titled Fragment from a Margaret Atwood's novel. The passage shows a woman pacing with sharp steps and clenched fists while a storm of anger, confusion, and sadness churns inside her. The question asks how the author conveys the complexity of her emotions after the pivotal event. We need to identify the technique the author actually uses. The choices offer explicit emotional discussion, symbolic physical actions, external dialogue mirroring thoughts, or dialogue contrasted with nonverbal cues. We can test each against what the passage actually contains. Choice A fails because the passage names emotions only briefly and does not explicitly unpack or discuss them in detail. Choice C fails because there is no external dialogue at all in the passage. The protagonist never speaks. Choice D fails for the same reason, since dialogue is absent and therefore cannot be contrasted with the nonverbal cues we do see. Choice B fits precisely. The author shows the pacing, the sharp steps, and the clenched fists, and these physical actions symbolize the inner turmoil that the surface calm tries to hide. The body becomes the vehicle for the emotional complexity rather than direct exposition. Question 21 of 25, a medium after that. This passage is titled Unveiling the Origins of the Periodic Table. The passage describes Mendeleev's 1869 periodic table, noting how he arranged elements by atomic weight and recurring chemical properties, predicted undiscovered elements like gallium and germanium, and revolutionized our understanding of matter. The question asks which choice best states the main purpose of the text. We need a choice that captures the full scope of the passage, not a single detail. The text blends historical background, the science behind the periodic law, and the table's lasting impact, so the right answer should cover both the historical setting and the scientific significance. Choice A is too narrow because the passage centers on the periodic table itself and its impact, not a survey of Mendeleev's broader contributions. Choice B names only one supporting detail, the prediction of gallium and germanium, which illustrates significance but is not the overall point. Choice C misrepresents the focus since the text does not emphasize changes to classification systems, but rather the table's role as an organizing and predictive framework. Choice D fits because the passage opens with historical context, the year and Mendeleev's nationality, then moves into the scientific significance, the periodic law, predictive success, and revolutionary framework for chemistry. D captures both threads together, rather than isolating one. Question 22 of 25. Here's an easier one. This passage is titled Tesla and the Creation of the AC Motor. The passage centers on Nikola Tesla's design of the first practical alternating current motor in 1887, the resistance he faced from DC proponents like Edison, and how AC ultimately became the global standard. The question asks which choice states the main purpose of the passage. We need a choice that captures both Tesla's specific innovation and its broader consequences, not one that zooms in on a single supporting detail or a tangential frame. Choice A is wrong because the text never discusses Tesla's early life or scientific training. It begins with his 1887 motor. Choice B overstates a minor element. Edison's opposition is mentioned briefly, but the passage's emphasis is achievement, not hardship. Choice D is too narrow in a different direction. The AC versus DC rivalry appears only as context that frames Tesla's contributions rather than as the central subject. Choice C fits because the passage devotes its core to Tesla's development of the AC motor and then traces its lasting impact on electrical power distribution and how energy was used worldwide. That dual focus on contribution and societal effect matches C precisely. Question 23 of 25, and now a hard one. This passage is titled The Duality of Technological Progress. The passage explores how digital technology has been both helpful and harmful, citing instant communication alongside privacy erosion and AI efficiency alongside job displacement. The question asks how the author illustrates this duality of technology's impact on society. We have four possible techniques: juxtaposing positive and negative consequences, citing statistical data, offering only positive anecdotes, or posing rhetorical questions. Our task is to match the author's actual method to one of these descriptions. Choice B fails because the passage contains no numbers, percentages, or statistical data at all. It relies on descriptive examples. Choice C is wrong because the author clearly discusses disadvantages like privacy erosion and job loss, not only advantages. Choice D is incorrect because the passage poses no questions to the reader. It states its points through declarative examples rather than rhetorical questioning. Choice A is correct because the author pairs each benefit with a corresponding drawback. Communication tools connect families but erode privacy, and artificial intelligence boosts efficiency but displaces workers. This deliberate side-by-side pairing of positive and negative outcomes is the very definition of juxtaposition, and it directly demonstrates the duality the stem references. Question 24 of 25, a medium after that. This passage is titled Transformation of Energy Harvesting Techniques. The passage describes piezoelectric materials which generate electrical charge under mechanical stress and traces how their applications have expanded from wearable devices to smart pavements. The question asks which choice best states the main purpose of the text. We need a choice that captures the passage's central thrust, framing piezoelectricity as an emerging force in sustainable energy. The right answer should reflect both the broadening applications and the ecological framing, not a side detail. Choice A points to the Curie's discovery, but that historical note is one supporting sentence, not the focus. Choice C raises challenges of integration, yet the passage describes advancements and successful applications, never obstacles. Choice D is too broad. The text concentrates specifically on piezoelectric materials, not a survey of various sustainable energy technologies. Choice B fits because the passage opens by calling piezoelectric materials a turning point in sustainable energy harvesting and closes by naming piezoelectricity a key player in sustainable energy solutions. The middle sentences reinforce that purpose by listing modern applications, so highlighting its growing importance in sustainable energy practices captures the text's main aim. Question 25 of 25. Final question, and it's a hard one. This passage is titled The Cultural Shift of the Printing Press. The passage describes how Gutenberg's printing press transformed European intellectual life, spreading literacy beyond the clergy and elite while disrupting traditional power structures. The question asks how the author frames the cultural impact of this invention. The choices range from narrow framings, such as ignoring cultural effects entirely, or focusing only on religious disruption or literacy, to a broader framing that captures multiple consequences at once. We need the option that matches the passage's full scope. Choice A fails because the passage devotes most of its lines to cultural consequences, not to technology in isolation. Choice B is too narrow, since religious disruption is only one strand alongside literacy and the broader spread of ideas. Choice D also reduces the passage to a single thread. Literacy is mentioned, but the author goes well beyond the lower classes to address debate, power, and intellectual life overall. Choice C is correct because the passage explicitly names a democratization of ideas and also describes how the press disrupted traditional power structures, challenging the church's monopoly on interpretation. That dual emphasis on democratizing influence and challenges to hierarchy is exactly what C captures. That's all, 25 questions for Module 1. Pause the video and count up how many you got right. If you found this helpful, like and subscribe. I post full walkthroughs like this for every practice test. Good luck on test day. You've got this.